Ambassador Jinwoo Park felt his stomach drop as the transport shuttle docked with the massive space station. Through the small window, he could see the enormous structure stretching out like a metal city floating among the stars. This was the Galactic Council Station, where representatives from dozens of alien worlds came to solve their problems. Today, Jinwoo had to help stop a war that could destroy millions of lives. He picked up his black diplomatic case and stepped off the shuttle. The moment his feet touched the station floor, he felt different. The artificial gravity was stronger than Earth's, making him feel heavier. The air smelled strange too, metallic and sharp, mixed with scents from alien beings he could not identify. Jinwoo took a deep breath and walked forward. He had trained for this moment his entire career. The war had been going on for 2 years. The Vorthok Empire and the Kalani Federation were fighting across 17 different star systems. Ships exploded in space battles every day. Planets were bombed from orbit. Millions of people had already died, and millions more would die if the fighting continued. The other alien races in the galaxy were getting worried. If this war spread, it could tear apart the peace they had all worked so hard to build. That was why they had called humanity. Humans were still new to galactic politics. They had only been traveling between stars for about 300 years. Most of the other alien species had been doing it for thousands of years. But humans had earned a reputation for something special. When other species could only see problems, humans somehow found solutions. They thought differently. They looked at situations from angles that no one else considered. Jin-Woo walked through the station's corridors, passing aliens of all shapes and sizes. Some looked almost human, but with different colored skin or extra arms. Others were completely strange floating gas clouds, walking plants, or beings made of what looked like living crystal. They all stared at him as he passed. Everyone knew why he was here. The Grand Assembly Hall was enormous. It had to be, to fit representatives from 47 different species. The ceiling stretched up so high that Jinwoo could barely see it. Thousands of seats surrounded a central area where speakers could address the crowd. The air buzzed with nervous energy. Everyone knew that today's meeting could decide the fate of entire worlds. Jinwoo walked to the mediator's podium in the center of the hall. His assistant, Hijin Kim, followed close behind him. She carried her tablet computer and looked as nervous as Jinwoo felt. They had worked together for 5 years, and she was one of the smartest people he knew. If she was worried, then the situation was really bad. The Vorthok delegation entered the hall first. Jinwoo had seen pictures of them before, but seeing them in person was different. They were huge. The smallest one was at least 8 feet tall. Their skin looked like black stone, covered in thick scales that had clearly turned aside many weapons in battle. Their eyes glowed amber, like hot coals. When they moved, Jinwoo could see powerful muscles rippling under their armored hide. Their leader was the biggest and most frightening of all. Warlord Gorthak stood almost 10 feet tall. His scales were covered in scars from countless battles. Some of the scars looked like they came from claws. Others looked like burn marks from energy weapons. His hands ended in razor-sharp claws that gleamed in the hall's artificial light. When he looked at Jinwoo, his glowing eyes seemed to see right through him. Jin-Woo stood up straight and tried to project confidence he did not feel. He had given thousands of speeches before, but never with stakes this high. He cleared his throat and began to speak in Galactic Standard, the common language that all species used for official business. Honored delegates, Jinwoo said, his voice carrying clearly through the hall's sound system. We gather today not as enemies, but as civilized beings seeking peace. The conflict between silence, soft-skin Gorthak's voice was like thunder. It boomed across the hall so loudly that some of the smaller aliens covered their ears. What right do these hairless weaklings have to speak of war and peace? Humans cower behind their technology, knowing nothing of true combat or honor. The hall fell completely silent. Jinwoo had expected hostility, but this was worse than he had imagined. Gorthak was not just disagreeing with human involvement, he was insulting humanity itself. Jinwoo kept his face calm, even though his heart was beating fast. He had dealt with difficult negotiations before. The key was to stay calm and find common ground. Warlord Gorthak, Jinwoo replied politely, I understand your people value strength above all else. Perhaps we can find ways that our different perspectives can common ground. Gorthak's laugh sounded like rocks grinding together. Your species crawled out of the mud barely 3 centuries ago. You have no warriors, no honor, no understanding of what it means to face death with courage. You are insects pretending to be eagles. The insult hit Jinwoo like a physical blow. Around the hall, aliens whispered to each other in dozens of different languages. Hyjin's hand moved toward her tablet, probably to check protocol for handling such situations. But Jinwoo gave her a tiny shake of his head. He had an idea, a dangerous one. I see, Jinwoo said quietly, his voice somehow carrying to every corner of the vast hall. Then perhaps the Warlord would prefer to settle this matter in a more traditional fashion. Gorthak's glowing eyes blazed brighter. He knew exactly what Jinwoo was suggesting. In the ancient language of his people, he spoke words that made every alien in the hall gasp in shock. I invoke the right of Vorthmar. Let combat decide who speaks with authority. The challenge was made. According to ancient law, it could not be refused without bringing shame on humanity forever. Jinwoo had just agreed to fight one of the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy in single combat. Within 3 hours of the challenge, betting pools had opened on every civilized planet in the galaxy. The numbers were shocking. 15,000 to 1 against the human. Some gambling houses refused to even take bets, saying it would be like betting on whether gravity would work tomorrow. Sports announcers who normally covered the most violent, gladiatorial contests in known space found themselves at a loss for words. How do you describe what everyone expected to be a 10-second execution? On the entertainment networks, expert commentators tried to analyze the upcoming fight. They showed holographic displays of previous Rite of Vorthmar battles, warriors being torn apart in seconds, claws slicing through armor like paper, blood pooling on arena floors. Then they showed a picture of Ambassador Jinwoo Park, sitting calmly at a negotiation table, and the absurdity of the situation became clear to everyone watching. In the station's main training facility, Warlord Gorthak practiced his combat forms. The room was designed for beings of all sizes, but even in this massive space, he looked enormous. His body moved with the fluid grace of a perfect killing machine. Each punch he threw created a sonic boom. When his claws struck the reinforced training dummies, they shattered into pieces. Gorthak had been fighting since he could walk. His species, the Vorthak, came from a death world where everything tried to kill everything else. The plants had poisonous thorns and moving roots that strangled unwary prey. The animals were armored predators with razor teeth and acidic blood. Even the weather was deadly, storms that could melt flesh and winds that carried flesh-eating bacteria. To survive on such a world, the Vorthok had evolved into perfect warriors. Their scales were harder than most metals. Their claws could cut through starship hulls. Their reflexes were so fast that they could dodge energy weapon fire, and their endurance in combat was legendary. Gorthak had once fought continuously for 18 hours during the siege of Kalar Prime. His combat record was terrifying. 300 victories in ritual combat, 0 defeats, 0 survivors among his opponents, because the Rite of Vorthmar traditionally ended only with death. He had fought in the Great Crusade against the machine intelligence of Andromeda. He had personally led the assault that burned Nexus Prime, the fortress world that everyone said could never be conquered. His name was spoken in whispers across a dozen star systems. Meanwhile, in the station's quiet library, Ambassador Jinwoo Park sat reading at a small table. The contrast could not have been more obvious. While Gorthak's training shook the entire facility, Jinwoo barely made a sound as he turned the pages of his research materials. His hands were soft and pale, showing no signs of combat training. At 53 years old, he moved with the careful precision of someone whose biggest physical challenge was climbing stairs after a long day of meetings. Jinwoo's assistant, Hyejin Kim, approached his table carrying a steaming cup of tea. Her face showed the strain of the past few hours. She had been fielding calls from Earth, from other human diplomats, from reporters, and from what seemed like half the galaxy. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. Had humanity's most experienced diplomat completely lost his mind? "Sir," she said quietly, setting the tea down beside his tablet computer. "The medical staff contacted me. They want to know about your funeral preferences. What type of ceremony you would want, whether you want to be buried on Earth or in space, that sort of thing." Jinwoo looked up from his reading with a slight smile. His calm expression had not changed since the challenge was issued. "Don't you think that's a bit premature, Hyejin?" She sat down across from him and dropped all diplomatic formality. They had worked together too long for polite pretense. "Jinwoo, listen to me. Gorthak has killed 300 beings in ritual. Combat 300. His claws contain a neurotoxin that can paralyze a creature twice his size. His species evolved as the top predator on a world where the plants try to eat you. What possible chance do you think you have against something like that?" Jinwoo marked his place in the document he was reading and gave her his full attention. "That's an interesting question. Tell me, what do you know about the rules of the Rite of Vorthmar?" "I know enough. It's single combat, using only natural weapons and abilities. No technology, no weapons, no armor. Just whatever your species was born with." "Exactly," Jinwoo said, tapping the tablet screen. "Each combatant fights, using their species, natural weapons and abilities. Gorthak gets claws, fangs, armored scales, poison, incredible strength, and lightning-fast reflexes, right? And you get what, exactly? Soft skin and the ability to sweat." Jin tapped his temple with one finger. "I get this. And approximately 2 million years of evolution that transformed a species of frightened tree-dwelling primates into the most successful persistence hunters that Earth ever produced." Hyejin stared at him. "Persistence hunters. Humans didn't evolve to be the strongest or the fastest, Hyejin. We evolved to be the most stubborn. Our ancestors hunted by following their prey for days or weeks, until the animal literally collapsed. From exhaustion. We couldn't outrun a deer in a sprint, but we could follow it until it died of fatigue." That evening, Jinwoo made a request that puzzled everyone on the council. He wanted the combat arena configured as an Earth-type environment. Specifically, he wanted grasslands, scattered trees, varied terrain, and a full day-night cycle. When the council arbitrators asked why, he simply said it would give him home field advantage. The alien observers looked at each other with confusion and pity. It seemed like the desperate gesture of a being who knew he was about to die and wanted to spend his last moments somewhere that reminded him of home. Even the betting odds got worse. Some houses moved the line to 20,000 to 1 against the human. Nobody understood what Jinwoo was really planning. Nobody, except Jinwoo himself, who went to sleep that night with the calm confidence of a man who finally understood exactly how he was going to win. While Warlord, Gorthak spent his days destroying training equipment and practicing death strikes. Ambassador Jinwoo Park chose a completely different path. Instead of learning how to fight, he decided to learn how to think. He spent long hours in the station's vast digital library, reading everything he could find about Vorthok culture, history, and psychology. What Jinwoo discovered surprised him. Yes, the Vorthok were fierce warriors who valued strength above almost everything else. But they were not simple brutes who only understood violence. Deep in their ancient texts, Jinwoo found something unexpected. The Vorthok were actually a deeply thoughtful people who respected wisdom just as much as they respected power. Their greatest legends were not just about warriors who could kill, but about warrior philosophers who could think. The most famous Vorthok hero was not their strongest fighter, but a leader named Kethfer the Wise. He had won a war, not through superior force, but by understanding his enemies' weaknesses and using strategy to defeat them. The Vorthok sang songs about how Kethfer had saved their entire species by outthinking opponents who seemed impossible to beat. This gave Jinwoo hope. If the Vorthok respected wisdom, then maybe there was a way to win this fight that did not involve trying to match Gorthok's physical strength. Jinwoo began to research something else, the evolutionary history of humanity itself. Humans had not always been the masters of Earth. For millions of years, they were small, weak creatures, living in trees, hiding from bigger and more dangerous animals. They had no claws, no fangs, no armor, no poison. They were not the fastest runners or the strongest fighters. By all logic, they should have been extinct long ago. But humans had survived, and eventually thrived, because of one special ability. They were persistent hunters. Human ancestors would pick out a large animal, an antelope, a deer, or even something as big as a mammoth, and simply follow it, not chase it in a sprint, but follow it at a steady pace for hours, days, or even weeks. The prey animal would run away quickly, using all its energy in a burst of speed. But humans would keep coming, slowly, steadily, never stopping. When the animal rested, humans would catch up. When it ran again, humans would follow again. Eventually, the prey would collapse from pure exhaustion, and the humans would finally catch it. This was how humanity had conquered Earth, not through being the strongest or fastest, but through being the most stubborn. They simply never gave up. Jin-Woo explained this to Hai-Jin as they walked through the station's observation deck. Outside the massive windows, they could see spaceships moving between the stars like glowing dots. The beauty of the scene seemed strange when compared to the violence that was coming tomorrow. The human species evolved as pursuit predators, Jinwoo said calmly. We could not run faster than our prey, but we could run longer. We could not fight stronger than our enemies, but we could think faster and plan better. Hai-Jin shook her head. That's interesting history, Jinwoo, but it does not change the basic facts. Tomorrow you are going to face a 10-foot-tall killing machine in hand-to-hand combat. He has claws that can cut through steel and poison that can drop a creature twice his size. How is evolutionary psychology going to help you survive that? Jinwoo stopped walking and looked out at the stars. His reflection in the window showed a middle-aged man who looked more like a university professor than a warrior. Let me tell you about the siege of Marathon Ridge, he said quietly. That was during the colonial wars, right? About 100 years ago. Exactly. A human colony called Marathon Ridge was surrounded by enemy forces. The attackers had better weapons, more soldiers, and complete control of the air and space around the planet. The human defenders were outnumbered 10 to 1. They had no hope of reinforcement and no way to escape. Hai-Jin knew this story from history classes, but she let Jinwoo continue. The enemy commander sent a message demanding immediate surrender. He promised to be merciful if the humans gave up without a fight. The human commander was a woman named Colonel Sarah Chen. She was 45 years old, had 2 children back on Earth, and was facing the most powerful military force their enemy had ever assembled. What did she do? She sent back a message, containing exactly one word: no. Then she and her people held that ridge for 6 months. They fought every day. They endured bombing from orbit. They ate emergency rations and drank recycled water. Many of them died, but they never surrendered. Jinwoo turned away from the window to face Hai-Jin directly. After 6 months, do you know what happened? The enemy gave up. They had lost more soldiers trying to take one small colony than they had lost in the previous 10 years of war. They decided the humans were too crazy and too stubborn to be worth fighting. They withdrew and never came back. But Jinwoo, that was a military battle with weapons and tactics. Tomorrow, you will be alone in an arena with no weapons except your bare hands. True, but the principle is the same. Humans do not win by being stronger or faster. We win by refusing to quit when any reasonable being would give up. That night, Jinwoo made his final preparations. He studied maps of the arena that would be built for tomorrow's fight. He reviewed everything he had learned about Vorthok psychology and honor codes. He practiced the meditation techniques his grandfather had taught him as a child, breathing exercises, designed to keep the mind calm under extreme stress. When Hajin asked if he felt ready for the fight, Jinwoo gave her an answer that humans had been giving for thousands of years when facing impossible odds. It was not a confident yes or a fearful no. Instead, he smiled slightly and said the most human thing of all, "We will see." The great arena was packed with beings from every corner of the galaxy. Creatures with wings sat next to others that looked like walking crystals. Gas cloud entities floated above seats designed for more solid forms of life. In the premium viewing sections, ambassadors and military commanders from dozens of worlds watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to horror. Everyone knew they were about to witness what most believed would be the shortest and most one-sided fight in the history of ritual combat. Holographic cameras captured every angle, broadcasting the event live to billions of viewers across thousands of planets. Sports commentators struggled to find appropriate words. How do you provide exciting commentary for what everyone expected to be a 10-second execution? Betting pools had closed because the odds had become meaningless. This was not a contest. It was a public demonstration of what happened when someone challenged a Vorthok warrior. The arena itself had been transformed, according to Jinwoo's strange request. What had been a standard combat pit was now a recreation of Earth's African savanna. Golden grasslands stretched across the fighting space, broken up by scattered acacia trees and small rocky outcroppings. The artificial sun blazed overhead, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of dry grass. To most observers, it looked like an expensive way for a human to die in familiar surroundings. Warlord Gorthak entered the arena first through the massive steel gates. Even in this enormous space, he looked huge. His black scales gleamed like polished stone in the artificial sunlight. Each step he took left deep prints in the earth. He wore no armor, because he needed none. His hide had deflected plasma bolts and energy weapons in real battles across the galaxy. His claws caught the light as he flexed his hands, each razor-sharp talon capable of slicing through starship hull plating. The crowd fell silent as Gorthak reached the center of the arena. He raised his arms and roared, a sound like thunder that echoed off the arena walls. Some of the smaller aliens in the audience covered their ears or backed away from the noise. This was the sound that had terrified enemies on 100 battlefields. Then Jinwoo appeared at the opposite end of the arena, and the silence deepened. The contrast was almost comical. Where Gorthak was a mountain of muscle and armor, Jinwoo looked like an ordinary middle-aged human. He had removed his formal diplomatic jacket and wore simple running clothes, lightweight shorts, a breathable shirt, and well-worn athletic shoes. Some spectators wondered if he had already given up and was dressed for comfort in his final moments. The ritual began with ancient words spoken in the old Vorthok tongue. Blessings were recited. Traditional challenges were issued and accepted. The formal ceremonies took nearly 20 minutes. But Jinwoo stood calmly throughout, showing no signs of fear or nervousness. He looked more like someone waiting for a morning jog than a man about to fight for his life. Finally, the combat horn sounded. The duel had officially begun. Gorthak immediately charged forward with incredible speed. His powerful legs launched him across the grassland like a missile. his claws extended fully, ready to end the fight with a single devastating strike. The crowd held its breath, expecting to see blood spray across the golden grass within seconds, but when Gorthak's claws swept through the air, they hit nothing. Jinwoo was no longer standing where he had been a moment before. The human had started running, not in panic or terror, but with the smooth, steady stride of an experienced distance runner. He moved across the savannah with obvious purpose, staying just far enough ahead of Gorthak to avoid those deadly claws, but never seeming to push himself to his maximum speed. "What is he doing?" aliens muttered in the stands. This was not combat as anyone understood it. Where were the dramatic strikes? Where was the heroic struggle? Jinwoo was just ... running away. For the first hour, Gorthak pursued his prey with complete confidence. His species had evolved as ambush predators, designed to catch and kill their targets quickly. His powerful legs carried him forward in great leaping bounds, and he always seemed to be just about to catch the fleeing human. But somehow, Jinwoo always managed to stay just out of reach. The human used every feature of the artificial landscape to his advantage. He doubled back on his own trail, forcing Gorthak to change direction suddenly. He ran around trees, over small hills, and through patches of tall grass. He never let himself get cornered, and he never stopped moving at that same, steady, infuriating pace. By the second hour, something began to change. Gorthak's charges became less frequent and less explosive. His roars of rage grew hoarse and labored. The Vorthok body, built for overwhelming power in short bursts, had never been designed for this kind of sustained pursuit. Gorthok was starting to tire. That was when Jinwoo began to talk. "Warlord," he called out as he jogged easily up a small slope. "Your people have a famous saying, strength flows from the spirit, not from the claw. I have always admired that wisdom." Gorthak snarled and lunged forward again, but his movements were clearly becoming more labored. His breathing was getting heavier. "Did you know?" Jinwoo continued conversationally as he circled a cluster of acacia trees that humans once hunted, animals 10 times our size, using nothing but persistence. We could not outrun them in a sprint, but we could outlast them over days or weeks. The crowd had grown completely silent. They were witnessing something that had never happened before in the entire history of the Rite of Vorthmar. A human was defeating a Vorthok warrior not through superior strength or speed, but through something far stranger, the simple refusal to stop running. By the 4th hour, Gorthok was staggering. His massive frame, built for delivering crushing power, had become a terrible burden. Every step was an effort. His breathing came in harsh gasps. Meanwhile, Jinwoo looked like he could run for days. He was barely sweating. "Strength is not, always, about the killing blow, Warlord," Jinwoo said gently, as he maintained his steady distance. "Sometimes true strength is about enduring when others cannot. Sometimes it is about never giving up, even when victory seems impossible." Gorthak tried to charge one more time, but his legs gave out. He collapsed to his knees in the middle of the golden grassland. His breathing labored, his legendary pride shattered. He had been defeated, not by superior force, but by something more terrifying than any weapon, the absolute, unstoppable refusal of a human being to quit. Jinwoo walked slowly toward the collapsed warlord. His hands were open and empty, showing clearly that he carried no weapons. The crowd in the arena held its breath, waiting to see what the human would do next. In every previous Rite of Vorthmar, this moment ended the same way, with the victor delivering a killing blow to the defeated opponent. But Jinwoo did something that shocked everyone watching. Instead of attacking, he knelt down beside Gorthak and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small water bottle, the same one he had been carrying during his long run around the arena. Without saying a word, he offered it to the exhausted Warlord. "You fought with great honor, Warlord," Jinwoo said quietly, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. Your strength is real and impressive, but I think we have both learned today that strength can take many different forms. Gorthok stared at the human with wide amber eyes. In all his centuries of life, in all his battles across the galaxy, no opponent had ever shown him mercy. No defeated enemy had ever offered him aid. The concept was so foreign to Vorthok culture that he almost did not understand what was happening. Slowly, with great effort, Gorthok reached out and accepted the water bottle. He drank deeply, the cool liquid soothing his parched throat. When he finished, he looked up at Jinwoo with an expression that mixed shock, respect, and something that might have been gratitude. In the ancient language of his people, Gorthak spoke the ritual words that had been used for thousands of years to acknowledge defeat in combat. I recognize the superior warrior. You have shown me truths that I did not know existed. The moment those words left his mouth, the arena exploded into chaos. Aliens leaped from their seats, shouting in dozens of different languages. Some cheered, some argued, some simply stared in disbelief. The holographic cameras captured every moment, broadcasting the unprecedented scene to billions of viewers across the galaxy. For the first time in recorded history, a rite of Vorthmar had ended without death. More importantly, it had ended with a human victory, not through superior technology or advanced weapons, but through the very qualities that other species had always mocked. Humans were not stronger, or faster, or more dangerous than other races, but they were more stubborn, more persistent, and more willing to endure hardship than anyone had imagined. Within hours, the news had spread to every civilized world. The betting houses that had offered impossible odds against the human found themselves paying out massive sums to the few gamblers who had been crazy enough to bet on Jinwoo. Sports commentators who had prepared to describe a quick execution instead found themselves trying to explain a completely new form of combat. More importantly, the political implications began to sink in across the galaxy. If humans could defeat the most feared warrior species through sheer determination, what else might they be capable of? Governments that had dismissed humanity as weak newcomers suddenly began to reconsider their opinions. 3 days later, when the peace negotiations resumed, everything had changed. Both the Vorthok and Kalani delegations entered the meeting room with completely different attitudes. Gone was the arrogance and dismissive contempt they had shown before. They approached the mediation table with newfound respect for the human diplomat who had accomplished the impossible. Jinwoo used this change in atmosphere to his advantage. Instead of simply trying to stop the fighting, he crafted a treaty that addressed the real reasons the war had started in the first place. He created cultural exchange programs that would help both species understand each other better. He designed trade agreements that would make both sides wealthier through cooperation than they could ever be through conquest. He established a dispute resolution system that honored both species. Concepts of dignity and honor. The treaty that emerged from these negotiations was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. It did not just end a war, it created the foundation for lasting peace between two species that had been enemies for generations. The Galactic Council took notice. Within weeks, they formally recognized humanity's unique diplomatic capabilities. Requests for human mediation began arriving from across known space. Species that had been fighting for centuries suddenly wanted human diplomats to help them find peaceful solutions. The phrase, "never underestimate a human," became common in 17 different languages. What had started as a simple insult had become a warning that spread across the galaxy. 6 months later, Jinwoo stood in his office on Earth, looking out through the large windows at the Han River flowing past Seoul. The familiar sight was a welcome change from the artificial environments of space stations and alien worlds. He had returned home a hero, but he still preferred the quiet work of diplomacy to the attention that came with fame. Haijin knocked on his door and entered, carrying her ever-present datapad. Their working relationship had not changed, despite everything that had happened. She was still his most trusted assistant, and he still relied on her sharp intelligence and attention to detail. "Sir," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk, "we have received 3 new requests for mediation services. The Andromedan Trade Consortium wants help with a shipping dispute. The Spiral Arm Defense League needs assistance with a territorial disagreement. And ... She paused, a slight smile crossing her face. "The Vorthok Empire has asked us to help negotiate a marriage alliance with the Kalani Federation." Ginwu smiled at the irony. The 2 species that had been trying to destroy each other were now considering joining their royal families through marriage. "What did you tell them?" "That we would consider all requests carefully. But sir, I have to ask you something. When you started that duel with Gorthak, did you really know that your strategy would work? Did you actually believe you could win?" Jill was quiet for a long moment, watching the river flow toward the sea. It was an honest question that deserved an honest answer. "No," he said finally. "I had no idea if it would work. I just knew I had to try something, and running seemed like the most human response to an impossible situation." He turned away from the window to face her directly. "But maybe that is the most human thing of all, Hyjin. When faced with impossible odds, when everyone says we cannot win, when logic tells us to give up, we try anyway." Outside his office window, the sun was setting over Seoul, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. Across the galaxy, on thousands of different worlds, the universe was still learning what it meant to challenge the stubborn, persistent, utterly unreasonable species called humanity.